What's up, everybody? Smoove Cosplayer here, your favorite salsa dancing cosplayer, bringing you another episode of Smoove Rants. This one is going to be on the Transformers franchise, Transformers movie franchise. Now, this video is another follow-up to a video I did last year called Something Always Changes, where basically I'll talk about my growth in my fandom and how I came to accept the fact that anytime something crosses mediums, something's going to change, and how that's always been going on. And I realized it made no sense for me to be enraged about these changes because this is something that's always been a thing, not just with comics to movies or cartoons and movies, but as something crosses, something becomes a video game, something becomes a comic book from something else, something becomes a book from a movie. Anytime something crosses mediums, there is going to be a change. Whether it's a small change or large scale change, it's going to happen. You're not going to like every change, but it doesn't make sense to like nerd rage out over it all. When the Transformers franchise kicked off, I was already a little bit further along on that journey. Actually, the last video that I did, the one on X-Men, it's funny, the X-Men actually helped me get there. I often joke that the only thing that the original X-Men trilogy was good for was preparing me for Transformers and the BS I would see there. So I learned at that point to, when I go to these movies, turn off my fanboy, leave my fanboy at the door, and just enjoy the movie, which I was pretty much able to do. But that didn't stop my brain from recording every little thing that I did not like and think that they could have done better, things that they did wrong, so to speak. I will also say that at this point in my fandom, I'm also not as accepting of new things as I am now. So back then, me being a G1 Transformers fan, anything that didn't respect G1, I felt was trash. Like, I wasn't trying to hear it. I wasn't respectful of it at all. So I may not have. I wasn't the kind of person to like be on the message boards and social media and verbally saying anything to anybody about it. I pretty much kept it to myself. But in my head, I'm like, if you ain't G1, you ain't no real fan. But I don't feel that way now. I may not like the new things that are out, but I definitely respect people who came in on the new things and the fact that that's what they appreciate. And I don't force the old on anyone. But yeah, you are gonna get a if it ain't G1 it's trash vibe for me during this video, because I'm showing you guys what I was feeling at the time during these movies. And I am going to give, like with my X-Men video, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I'm going to highlight the things that I think they did get right, and why I feel they may have done this thing this way, even though I may not have liked it. So here we go, the Transformers movies. Oh, one more thing. I'm mainly going to be talking about the first three. I'm going to quickly dabble into Age of Extinction, Last Night, and Bumblebee, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on those, just because by that point I just kind of stopped caring about the things that weren't right. And I think just the writing on those wasn't all that good, except for Bumblebee. Bumblebee was cool. Anyway, Transformers 1. So right off the bat, I'm a little annoyed because we got this thing called the Allspark. And I'm like, where did this occur anywhere in Transformers mythos at all? This is my first time hearing about this. So I'm just like, we got this Allspark. Why are they not talking about the matrix of leadership? I don't get this. So that already had me like, really, y'all are already going left. They even go more left as soon as we see our first Transformer. You guys remember when they that military helicopter attacked the base in Qatar, and I see this helicopter and I'm like, oh snap, we finna get the Combaticons, right? No, this helicopter is named Blackout. Now Blackout is from, I forget what. I think it was Transformers Energon that Blackout made his debut in. So this is one of the changes that I don't like, and not just in Transformers, but in just movies in general. When they reach for an obscure character. Now I may be wrong. There may be some people out there who care about Blackout, but amongst what I got friends who like old Transformers, I got friends that like new Transformers. Nobody cares about Blackout Nobody's checking for him. Why now? Of course, the new people aren't going to be checking for somebody like Vortex, who I felt like that should have been. Vortex was one of the the helicopter from the Combaticons, and I'm like, we're dealing with military vehicles. You notice in Transformers 1, the Decepticons were very military vehicle heavy, which, you know, that shouldn't surprise anybody. But, you know, if you look at the old cartoon and comics, up until the Combaticons and Blitzwing showed up, it was basically military jets. So yes, military, but focused on the jets. But a lot of the vehicles used in Transformers 1 were all military vehicles. So I'm just like, perfect time for the Combaticons to have some shine, and they get none. We'll touch on some of that later. But Blackout, nobody cares about Blackout. So why is he being used? Right off the bat, we get reaching for obscurity, reaching for obscure characters nobody cares about. Now, you do when he transforms, you do hear the iconic classic Transformers noise when they transform. That is throughout all these movies. I can only think of one, maybe two other times where we hear that sound effect. I'm like, why take that away? That was an unnecessary change. That's something who longtime fans are looking for, and it shouldn't have just been a little Easter egg. I'm like, that pissed me off in the beginning. Now, the next Transformer we see, Scorponok. He's kind of like a little mini-con or whatever that jumps out of Blackout before he escapes. Now, Scorponok has already been through a few different iterations, so I wasn't really upset that, you know, he was just some little, not mindless, but no, didn't have any speaking lines. He was just some little mindless bot of destruction. So I wasn't really mad that they used him here. I mean, Scorponok went from being a huge, depending on the continuity, a huge city bot, like in the cartoons, or just a really, really big, almost Dinobot-sized robot, like in the comics. But then in Beast Wars, he's, you know, Megatron's second in command, but not very bright. So I mean, like I said, Scorponok has been through several iterations already, so I wasn't really mad at his appearance here and the role that they used him in. I was a little bit upset that we only saw him in his alternate form. Like, we never saw him in robot mode. Now, you'll notice throughout this video, I'll make mention to the toys. You know, like, even as an adult, I always take a stroll through. Whenever I'm in Walmart, Target, wherever, I always take a stroll through the toy section. Just habit, just the little kid and geek in me. And I noticed that the toys get things right, and the movie doesn't. The movie toys get things right. So anyway, I got to see that he actually had a robot form in the store, but it doesn't show in the movie at all. So next thing, we got Sam Witwicky. Now, I'm okay with them naming him. I was okay with them naming him Sam and not Spike, because name somebody you know whose name is Spike. Don't worry, I'll wait. You don't know anybody named Spike, so like, I get that they changed his name to Sam. Like, that made sense to me. Now, and you know, he kind of got the look. He kind of had the same brunette, curly haired look that Spike had in the cartoon. Now, I didn't like how, like, just spastic and bumbling he was in the. I know they did it for like comic relief and all of that, but you know, Spike in the comics, I mean, in the cartoon, was a whole lot more level-headed, a whole lot more, despite being a teenager, you know, very level-headed, very competent, whereas Sam was just, I don't know, I don't get what Michaela saw in him. Speaking of Michaela, I think Megan Fox kind of got a bad rap for this movie. I don't think she deserves the negativity that she got. I mean, this is all on the writers. The writers just wanted some eye candy. But she held her own though. You know, like, she was very useful in the movies. Like, a lot of she did a lot of the things that helped out the Autobots in the movies. So I mean, that and the fact that anything else is all on the writers, to me, you know, I feel like none of this is Megan Fox's fault. You know, it's not her fault for being hot. It's not her fault that they used her as just the hot eye candy. You know, that's not on her. And if that's, I think that's the first time I've seen her in any movies. So that this may very well have been her, you know, her breakout, her debut, and you know, she might have been thinking, hey, this is my shot, so I'm gonna take it. You know, if you're a newcomer, you're not gonna turn down. You know, I mean, some people do, but you know, you could forgive someone for thinking, I don't care how badly written this is. I don't care how much bad light this puts me in. This is my shot, so I'm gonna take it. So I don't really, if that was the case, I don't blame her for that. But I will say I was a little disappointed that her character, not her, but her character was not Carly from the cartoon. And Carly was, now, and both Michaela and Carly were smart in their various ways. So I'm not going to say that Michaela wasn't as smart as Carly. But yeah, just, you know, just the G1 fan in me was like, why is she not named Carly? Why is she not a blonde girl? Anyway, we moving on to Sam's dad, Ron Witwicky. He got the look. He had, you know, the widow's peak hairline going. But, you know, in the comics, I mean, not the comics, I'm sorry. In the cartoon, he was, I think in the comics too, rather. In the cartoon, he was, you know, construction worker, mechanic, you know, very, very useful character. He wasn't the dumb guy that he was in the movies. But I do think that they gave, even though we never see him, I think they gave that to, they remixed it there and gave that to, Michaela's dad, because Michaela's dad was a mechanic, but I think he was, I don't know if he was in jail or something something, he got in trouble with the law somehow in that movie, or before the movie anyway. But yeah, so I think they just kind of did a little remix with that, so that's why that was, I think. So on to our first Autobot, we got Bumblebee. Now a lot of people, a lot of G1 fans like me, they don't like how Bumblebee was not a Volkswagen Beetle. He was a Camaro instead. I liked that. I was okay with that because, you know, yes, my Bumblebee is this cute but very big-hearted, very courageous espionage character in a Volkswagen Beetle. I felt like, now I would be proven wrong with this later in the Bumblebee movie, but at the time I was like, nobody's gonna respect a Volkswagen Beetle. Nobody's gonna look at him as a threat. So I was okay with him being a Camaro in this one. I was totally fine with that. You know, this is one of the cases where I understand a change, how, you know, you have to make a change and make it more more contemporary, more up to date with what's going on now. And that's why I rolled with that change. I was like, okay, that works. Then we get Frenzy. He transformed into that little mini boombox, little CD player. When I saw him transform into that, I was a little upset at first, like for like a couple of split seconds. I was upset that he turned into a boombox. I'm like, okay, that should have been Soundwave. But given everything else that Frenzy did in the movie, I was like, no. I would be upset if this was Soundwave, because Frenzy don't act like Soundwave. He's just this little, you know, again, no speaking parts and unintelligible language, you know, not saying anything we can understand, just being spastic and scurrying around, and just, that would not have fit. Now, had they made him Soundwave, I'd have been like, no, y'all really screwed that up. So I quickly rescinded. Wait, why is this not Soundwave? Oh no, I see why it's not Soundwave. But you know, he, given his personality, I would say he fit with what the original, you know, minus the techno babble, you know, or the Cybertronian language or whatever. Minus that, he actually fit Frenzy's personality in the cartoon and the comics. The other thing I would give them credit for in this scene is that you see the Secret Service worker or the lady pick up the boombox and take it further into the Air Force One plane. I feel like that mirrored what happened in the original cartoon in the first few episodes, where Soundwave was just chilling on the counter, just barely inside the Autobot's base, and Spike picks it up. Oh, nice little Walkman, and he takes it further into the base. So I feel like that was a legit shout out to that scene from the cartoon. Next up, we got Barricade, the Decepticon car. Now, mixed feelings here with that one, because I see where they were going with that. I do, I do appreciate the dedication to the robots in disguise thing, because like nobody's gonna look at a police car and think it's a bad guy. So I give them props on that. But the thing I was annoyed about was like, why is there a police car who's not Prowl? So I get they had to do something because but you're not gonna have Prowl be a Decepticon. So I get it. So I was upset, but not too upset. I was also a little upset again at reaching for an obscure character. Barricade came in towards the very tail end of G1. They had these little toys where if you pulled them back, they would dash forward, and they would No, I was about to say they were the Sparkabots where you did that and little sparks would come out, but I don't think he was one of those. But he definitely was one where you would pull it back and it would dash forward. So the fact that, again, an obscure character, obscure, like I knew about that toy line, but I wasn't aware of that character until I looked it up. But I'm like, again, you're reaching here. Why reach for him? And then also, I'm like, you could have used, there's so many other, despite the fact that the Autobots had more cars than the Decepticons, there's so many more Decepticon cars you could have used. Pretty much all the Stunticons except for Motormaster, Runabout, Runamuck, and there's probably some other ones further down the line, but like so many other cars you could have used besides Barricade. So then we get the rest of the Autobots. Ironhide. I was mixed feelings about Ironhide. So I'm like, I was happy with them using a big, huge GMC truck as opposed to a minivan. Because just like with my thoughts originally on Bumblebee being a Camaro instead of a Volkswagen Beetle, just like I felt like you wouldn't respect the Volkswagen Beetle, I also felt like you wouldn't respect the minivan in this case. I'm like, you would just really look at him like the underdog and not really be intimidated by him. So I was in favor of them using this big old huge pickup truck instead. What I didn't like was, why is he black? Why do they paint him black? Like, and you'll get this a few more times in this video where a character should have been red and they make him not red. Michael Bay was on record saying that he felt like red doesn't show up well on film. Since when? Since when does red not show up well on film? I don't get that. That was just dumb to me. And then also, we'll get to Optimus Prime a little bit more later, but they got Optimus Prime's original voice actor, Peter Cullen, who also voiced Ironhide. If you listen to their voices in the original cartoon, you can pick up that it's the same person. But of course, he just put that Southern country twang on Ironhide's voice. But they used just some other English dude's voice for Ironhide's voice. I'm just like, you already had the voice actor. Why not use him there? People were probably looking forward to hearing Ironhide. Every time I look into a monitor, Prime, my circuit sizzle. When are we gonna start busting the Decepticons? Like that's that iconic line from Transformers, the movie, like the '85 movie. I'm just like, we were looking for that voice from him. And you could have used him because you had the same voice actor, but you didn't. I'm like, anyway. And we got Ratchet. Now, he had the same alt mode as, he was an ambulance, but it was the same pretty much. He was they were repaints of each other. Both Ironhide and Ratchet had the same build in the comics, cartoon, and the toys. But of course, Ratchet was an ambulance. So I get that they used him, like it was like that Hummer / emergency vehicle. So I get that one. I wasn't mad at that one at all. But I wasn't so mad about the paint job. I wish he would have been the same paint job as he was in the comics and cartoon, white and red. But given that you pretty much don't see that on the road anywhere with those types of vehicles, I can understand them not using that paint job. But I was a little pissed off when I did see the toy and that the toy was in that paint job. I'm like, you made the toy that color. You could have made it that color in the movie. Anyway, Jazz, mixed feelings there as well. Like you got the voice right. The original voice actor has passed away. Rest in peace. I forget his name, but I know who you were. I I'll know it. I think it was Buster Jones. I forget his name, but he was also the lone black guy in The Shining. I think it was that was the same guy. But his original voice actor passed away, rest in peace. But so they got, I think they used Darius McCray or McCrary. I forget what his last name is. Eddie Winslow from Family Matters. So I liked his voice. His voice fit who Jazz was supposed to be. I didn't like his alt mode because I'm like, how do you go from a Porsche to a Pontiac Solstice? That's a big downgrade. Now, what I think happened with this movie was that basically they used all GM vehicles for Transformers. So I can kind of get it. There's a part of me at the time I was like, dang, is GM just really just trying to plug themselves here? But I get, if you gotta stay within some kind of budget, I could understand, using the vehicles that you use. So a change that I didn't like, but I understand and didn't really give them a hard time about it. Another change that I didn't like, but I understand, Bumblebee being bigger than Jazz. And the reason why this is because I think I read somewhere that they decided against using mass displacement in this movie. Mass displacement is basically, long story short, how in the cartoons and comics, how Optimus Prime didn't have his trailer on him, but as soon as he transformed into a truck, his trailer just kind of came out of nowhere. How Megatron was the same size as all the other big Transformers, but as soon as he transformed, he was a gun that another Transformer could hold in his hand. Same thing with Soundwave. Soundwave being a big, huge, robot the same size as everybody else, and then transform into a Walkman that a human can hold. Same reason why the Stunticons, being a truck and 5 cars, transform into a big combined robot that's the same size as Devastator, who are construction vehicles. They should not be the same size. So I know that they decided not to do mass displacement in this movie, which is why Jazz is smaller than Bumblebee, because the Pontiac Solstice is smaller than Chevy Camaro. So again, I didn't like it, but I understand. Now, Optimus Prime. Now, again, people kind of had the same outrage with him as they did with Bumblebee. They didn't like how he had he was blue and had the orange and red flames on the hood and everything. I was cool with that, and also the whole fact that he was not a cab over engine truck as opposed to a forward engine truck. You rarely see those cab over engine trucks anymore. I mean, they're not extinct, but they're not as prominent as the forward engine cabs. So I understand them making that change. Again, this was just being contemporary. This was being more up to date with the times, as opposed to trying to exactly match what happened in the 80s. The same thing with Starscream. Skipping ahead a little bit, but Starscream in the comics and cartoon was an F-15. F-15s are obsolete now, which is why they used the F-22. And I could gripe about him not being the same colors, but again, we're keeping with the Robots in Disguise theme. You're not going to see a jet F-15 or F-22 flying around in silver, blue, and red. You don't see that in the military anywhere. So I get, with them keeping him just a solid gray like the rest of the fighter jets, so that way he could blend in. Again, Robots in Disguise. We got to keep that theme here. Now, what I didn't like about him and Megatron, a whole bunch of the other Transformers, and pretty much all Transformers, this is a theme throughout the whole franchise. A lot of them just look like a big old pile of jagged metal. And no bigger example of that than Megatron. He is the epitome of that. Like, why? I mean, he like, I don't even know where to start. And that's part of the joke there for me. Like, I don't know where any of him starts and ends. It's just a big old pile of walking jagged metal when he's transformed. Like, it looks nothing like his original. Like, I get they were trying to go for like monsterish, menacing, like you want him to look like a threat, but I'm like, he just doesn't look like anything. And another problem I had with Megatron was, and this is towards the end of the movie, but he was like several heads taller than Optimus Prime. Whereas in all other iterations, like, even if there is a height difference, it's not by much. Whereas this one, like, Optimus Prime had to look up, way up, at Megatron. Like that just didn't sit well with me, and the fact that Megatron pretty much handed Optimus Prime's head to him in this movie. Like every time they fought in any other continuity, whoever won, they didn't win by much. You know, nobody was ever. They were never. Neither one ever outclassed the other, but that happened in this movie, and I was just like, why does Optimus Prime look like he just can't win? Like he had to win by technicality, which was, you know, the jets coming through and blasting him with missiles, and then Sam finally putting the Allspark in his chest. That killed him. I'm like, why was that how he won and not Optimus Prime just outright winning? I'm actually going to come back to that because I do think that is I'll talk about that now. I do think that was a testament to Starscream and how they kept with his personality in this, even though he only got like 1 or 2 lines in the whole movie. If you notice, he flew in with the rest of the F-22s that came to try to, you know, kill the Decepticons. He transformed and then killed 1 or 2 of them, and then transformed back and then got in line with the rest of them. And he was among those jets that shot Megatron with missiles. So I do think that it's very subtle. It's not in your face. You know, it's something you might miss if you don't if you were just watching it for the first time. I do think this was Starscream trying to take shots at Megatron and trying to get rid of him and on the slide. Like he would always try to, in the comics and cartoon, he would always, any chance he had to get rid of Megatron, he would take that. And this was his way of attacking Megatron without people knowing it was him. So I do think that was deliberate in this movie. Moving on to some more the rest of the Decepticons. We already touched on Blackout, Frenzy, Scorponok, Barricade. I think the next one was Bone Crusher. The one this is actually like one of my favorite scenes from the whole movie. Him and Optimus Prime having a fight on the freeway. I was cool with Bone Crusher being in there. I mean, he fit the personality of Bone Crusher. Bone Crusher was a very mean-spirited, aggressive, abrasive Decepticon. Like he was just all about destruction and the survival of the fittest. So his portrayal was cool. The alt mode, I could take it or leave it. But I do feel like that they could have gave him a different alt mode and also named him Motormaster, because Motormaster was always about having a fight with Optimus Prime on the road and proving that he was king of the road and not Optimus Prime. So I feel like they could have gave him a different truck mode and named him Motormaster so they can actually, you know, fit that fight better. But yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the movie. Optimus Prime actually killing Bone Crusher. Like that showed Optimus Prime don't give no F's at all when it comes to like protecting people. He will hand your head to you. He did that literally. I think he took his head off in this scene. Now to the scene that pissed me all the way off in this movie. I was livid when I saw this. So we got a Decepticon tank that shows up. You know, and before all these movies come out, I always do my little reconnaissance, looking on the internet, seeing what I can find out about them. And I found out there would be a tank named Brawl, which I was happy about. I mentioned earlier how with all these military vehicles, this is a perfect time for the Combaticons to have some shine, and they failed here. Now, Brawl is a Combaticon. He was the tank from the Combaticons. So going into the movie, I'm happy. And I'm, again, livid to see that, you know, where they're sounding off, they changed his name to Devastator. Devastator was actually the combined form of the Constructicons, which Bone Crusher is a part of. So how do you have part of Devastator, Bone Crusher, and Devastator in the movie at the same time? That's two different things. No. Y'all got me all the way effed up with that one. So just the fact that they changed his name, and I would find out later that it was some kind of production error, but still, how does that production error make it past so many people and nobody changes it? Anyway, so yeah, I'm more mad about it because of some events in the next movies. Actually, let's just go ahead and go into the next one. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. So we'll come back to the whole Devastator thing, but just for now, it pissed me off in the moment, and it pissed me off even more in this movie because it basically flowed over into Revenge of the Fallen. Now, main bad guy in this movie, the Fallen, he was a fairly new thing in the comics. I think in the IDW, not the IDW, in the Dreamwave comics, he showed up there, and he was one of the original primes there. So they didn't mess up too much with that, except for maybe his look. Like I don't even know what to do with that robot form there. It looked nothing like the original Fallen, but he was such a new character where I didn't care too much about it. But yeah, so the next ones, and this is something that a lot of people had a problem with. You got the twins, Skids and Mudflap. Now they first show up. Now they're a nod to, at least when they first show up anyway, they're a nod to, I forget the name of, I think these are some of the Microbots. The Microbots came out like late 80s. Late 80s. I think I was like 7 or 8 back then. And you would have these two Transformers who they were two individual robot modes, but in their combined modes, in their alt modes, they were two separate parts of the same vehicle. So one was the front half and one was the back half. So they were not, Mudflap and Skids were a nod to that. So I give them props on that, but Mudflap and Skids themselves, yeah, very, very cringeworthy, very unnecessary. Now Skids was a character who might have showed up in like 2 episodes in all of the original cartoon and only had one line, but he was a lot more prominent in the comics. Like Skids was a ladies bot in the comics. Like there's this one scene where like he got this human girl to like give him a car wash, and like he's like, would you please would you mind washing my hubcaps again? And she's like, sure. And she's like, and yeah, I'll just show you a picture here. But yeah, Skids was pretty much a ladies bot in the comics, whereas he didn't get any shine at all in the cartoon. So I mean, they kind of fit him in this movie, like the fact that his robot mode, his alt mode being a car. I mean, it fit. The color scheme was off, but it's not too much to complain about on that part. Mudflap was some kind of like crane-looking vehicle. It reminded me of Hook from the Constructicons. I think he was from Transformers Cybertron. Again, maybe the kids at that point might have known who Mudflap is, but again, I would dare to say that nobody cares about Mudflap. So again, this was another reach for obscure characters there. Before I move on from the twins, the thing that people really hated about the twins was just their personality. Like there was so many racist stereotypes that they fit in with them, and like one of them even admitted to not doing a whole lot of reading. One of them had a gold tooth, and they were always like bickering and everything. Like it was just unnecessary, and I'm so glad they didn't bring them back for any movies after that. So that's all I'll say on them, because we could complain about them all day. Next up, we got the RC twins, which annoyed me. Again, leading up to the movie, I did research on them. I found out, we're gonna get RC, Chromia, and Elita 1 in this movie, and that's how they were named in their toys. They were individual toys, individual Transformers, but then as soon as the movie comes out, they just label them the RC twins, and they're all one sentient mind spread across 3 different characters, which I was like, no. And I was about to say that maybe they were, maybe this was a nod to Reflector. Reflector was 3 Decepticons. They were all identical. Well, they were identical in the cartoon, but in the toys, they were all different colored robot modes, but they all transformed into one camera. So I'm wondering if, and they all seemed to, in the cartoon anyway, they all seemed to be one sentient mind. So I'm wondering if this was a nod to that, but I still didn't like that. Especially when we're so scarce on female characters anyway. Why make all 3 female Autobots the same essential character, but just spread across 3 different robot bodies? Like that I really feel like that did them a disservice, especially for those who were looking for RC in particular. So I was like, yeah, y'all did them dirty on that one. Next Transformer we see is Demolisher. I think that he was one of the few characters from the newer Transformers that I did recognize. He definitely was not a construction vehicle, but he did kind of fit the personality and the disposition of Demolisher. And I also like that they got a little creative with this one, because a lot of the times we are used to seeing a Transformer that has a vehicle alt mode and a robot humanoid robot mode. But this one, he had a non-humanoid robot mode. He kind of reminds me of Zod from the GoBots. But yeah, I like how they went a little outside of the box with this one. I actually liked that that change. That also taught me that excavators are sometimes that big. I was like, there's no way there's an excavator that big. And then I looked it up. I'm like, oh, they do get that big. Now, next Transformer we get is Sideways. He's like that. I think it was that Audi. I forget what model Audi, but that Audi car there that just kind of scurried away when they got found out. Sideways, I feel like they could have used somebody else here. Now, Sideways in the cartoon, he debuted in Transformers Armada. He was this motorcycle who would kind of flip back and forth with his allegiance, kind of like Punch and Counterpunch did in the in G1. But he was actually a servant of Unicron, kind of like he was like Unicron's version of Silver Surfer. Like, you know, Silver Surfer was the herald of Galactus. So Sideways is to Silver Surfer as Unicron is to Galactus, if that makes sense. For them to use a car here, I feel like instead of naming him Sideways, he could have been Breakdown from the Stunticons, because that they fit his personality fit there. Breakdown was always super nervous and paranoid. So I feel like his personality fit this car, and they're both cars. So I'm like, they could have used him there as opposed to Sideways. Next up is one of my favorites. Sideswipe. Sideswipe, one of my top 5 Autobots and my favorite Autobot car of them all. You know, normally he's a red Lamborghini, and Lamborghinis are my favorite sports car. I don't know if I like Lamborghinis because of Sideswipe or vice versa anyway. I, for the most part, loved that he was in this movie, but I didn't like how they portrayed him. Now, he had a really sick car mode. He was a Chevy, a Corvette Stingray, and his version of it was made specifically for the movie, so that was pretty dope. But I'm like, he was supposed to be a Lamborghini. I was looking forward to seeing him be a Lamborghini, and I will be a little bit later, and I'll touch on this some more, when two other Transformers get Lamborghinis as their alt mode later on. I'm like, why didn't Sideswipe get that? Why did you give his alt mode to some other people? But the other things I didn't like about his alt mode, again, he was supposed to be red. They made him silver. Michael Bay on that BS talking about, oh, red doesn't show up well on film, but yet they use red further on, later on down the line. I'm like, first of all, you gave his alt mode to somebody else. You gave his color to somebody else. You just screwed this all the way up. And also his alt mode looks more like Tracks from G1 than his own. So that was a little annoying to me there. Now they did get his personality right. Sideswipe was known to be one of the Autobots' best fighters, and he loved fighting. He loved he would even cheat to win. He was just so he just relished of fighting in general and winning in general. I do feel like they put a little bit of his brother's personality in there. His brother Sunstreaker was was a better fighter than him, and was very egotistical. So that whole "damn, I'm good," that little line he had at right after he killed Sideways, which was one of the dopest Transformers kills in the whole series. So I feel like him having that line, I feel like that was a little bit of them sprinkling in Sunstreaker and his personality. Speaking of Sunstreaker, Sideswipe and Sunstreaker, they were fraternal twins in the comics and cartoon. If there were any twins in this movie, I feel like it should have been them and not Mudflap and Skids. I could really see, later on you see Bumblebee rolling with Mudflap and Skids in as they get to Egypt. I really feel like that could have been, other than the fact that Sunstreaker and Bumblebee would have been yellow. I feel like that probably could have posed a problem. But other than that, I feel like it should have been Bumblebee, Sideswipe, and Sunstreaker over there. And later on, Mudflap and Skids face off against Devastator, and we'll get to that again in a minute. But I really feel like that could have been Sideswipe and Sunstreaker going off against Devastator. I feel like that was a huge opportunity, and I'm biased because I'm a Sideswipe fan and a Sunstreaker fan. So, but anyway, they could have done a whole lot more with that. But back to the whole twins thing, it should have been Sideswipe and Sunstreaker being two very competent. I mean, they probably would have bickered too, but it wouldn't have been so offensive and so comical in a bad way. They would have bickered, but they would have been very good in combat. They would have been two very capable twins, as opposed to the garbage that we got with Mudflap and Skids. Oh, and later on, again, with Sideswipe not being red, when you look at the toys later, there's a repaint of him named Swerve who's red, but I'm like, why would you make Swerve supposed to look like Sideswipe? That's the toy. That's what we should have gotten in the movie. But then they like Swerve. I know about Swerve. He showed up in the towards the end of season of the G1 cartoon in season 3. I'm like, again, I was just heartbroken because they didn't do my boy Sideswipe right, and then you're gonna give his color to a different character in a different toy later on. But yeah, next we get Soundwave. Now, I was a little. No, I actually wasn't mad at this at all. Soundwave didn't really take part in the combat at all. Soundwave was a satellite up in space the whole time, and basically given what Sideswipe does, I mean not Sideswipe, what Soundwave does, what Soundwave's function is, like communications and all that kind of stuff, his alt mode fit what he did in the movie. Like, I was not mad at that at all. That was a very clever spin on Soundwave. And plus, nobody listens to Walkmans anymore. Nobody has an actual tape deck anymore, or at least, and especially not at the time of the movie and not now. So it would have been very outdated for him to transform into a tape deck back then. So I like how they modernized his look here. Then we get Ravage. They were pretty on point with Ravage. I didn't really like the fact that he was a Cyclops, like the little one-eyed cat. But other than that, he was pretty good. I liked how they used him. They used him, just how they would have used him if he was in a cartoon. So that was, other than feeling about his look, it was on point. Then we also got Wheelie. Wheelie was that little remote control monster truck there. This is one of the times where they actually just slapped a name on a character, and this is a change that I, in general, don't like. I don't like when they just take a character's name and just slap it on a random character in the movie, and that character in the movie, other than sharing a name, doesn't have anything to do with the original character. Normally that pisses me off. I actually liked it here because I could not stand the original version of Wheelie. Like, he got on my last nerve. So the fact that they made him look different here, I was okay with it this time. That was just a personal preference for me there. Now, next up, we got something that pissed a lot of people off, but I actually liked, which was Alice, the blonde supermodel looking girl who was in class with Sam. So what I like about this one is this was actually a nod to the Pretenders line. Like, the Transformers would basically take on humanoid bodies, and they were able to blend in with regular society and then pop out of that Pretender shell when necessary. And I forget all of that went into it. I think it might have had something to do with power conservation too. But yeah, I feel like this was a really dope take on the Pretenders line. So a lot of people didn't like it, but I was like, it wasn't blatantly stated, but I'm like, that has got to be their nod to the Pretenders. And I was like, I'm all for it. And especially how they incorporated that. They used that to try to get to Sam and kill him. And that, yeah, again, Robots in Disguise, a very clever remix of something that existed. So I'm cool with that. Now, Megatron comes back, and they actually did something creative with him. They made Megatron a triple changer in this one. Like, it's very easy to miss because of how it happened so fast, but he was both a space fighter and a tank in this one, both Cybertronian. Now, what happens next is one of my my favorite fight scene in all of the Transformers movies, but it also rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, and I'll explain. So Megatron and Optimus Prime fight here, and again Megatron is towering over Optimus Prime, but Optimus Prime is beating the brakes off of Megatron here, which in a vacuum I'm happy with, and maybe you can explain this away by Megatron being resurrected again, but how do we go from Megatron beating the brakes off Optimus Prime in the first movie to the exact opposite in the second movie, so much that Megatron had to call in for reinforcements during that fight? So now you got Optimus Prime versus Megatron, Starscream, and Grindor. Grindor was basically the same, pretty much the same mold as Blackout from the first movie, this big old military helicopter. Again, you could have used Vortex from the Combaticons, and you didn't. Yeah, he's actually from Transformers Armada. Again, they're reaching for somebody that nobody cares about. Like, I really doubt if I talked to some Transformers fans that I know if they knew who Grindor was, or if they even knew that this particular Decepticon had a name. But anyway, you got Grindor, Starscream, and Megatron versus Optimus Prime, and Optimus Prime is handling all of them. Which, again, my favorite scene out of all of the movies. Pretty dope fight scene, but it doesn't explain. So how do you have Optimus Prime losing to Megatron severely in the first movie to be able to beat Megatron and two other Decepticons at the same time in this scene? It doesn't make sense. It was a good scene, I was happy about it, but it didn't make sense. I mean, just to break down how dope this scene is. Like, Optimus Prime goes upside Megatron's head with a huge tree. He spears Starscream. He spears Megatron. He cuts off Grindor's rotor blades and his arm. He picks up Starscream, throws him, and it kicks him in the head before he lands. I think that was CM Punk's finisher. And then he cuts off Starscream's arm and beats him with it, and then he literally climbs up Grindor and rips his face apart. Like, he is handling all three of them, including Megatron. The only reason he loses this fight is because he's trying to find Sam and protect him, and while he's distracted, of course, Megatron sneaks up behind him, like, impales him with his cannon blade and then blasts him there. I really feel like this was their nod to Hot Rod, it being Hot Rod's fault that Optimus Prime died in Transformers the movie, because that's the only he only died because he was trying to not hurt Hot Rod in the process of getting to Megatron. So I really feel like this was Sam's fault. Then another thing that pissed me off, we got Jetfire. The only other Transformer that I know that had a beard was Alpha Trion. Did get part of him right. He was a former Seeker, a former Decepticon Jet. He was a friend of Starscream's in the original. They remixed this a little bit in the recent Netflix series. That was pretty dope. I might review those later. But so they got that part right, which I was excited about. And you know, his alt mode, the SR-71, that was pretty dope. But they made him this old, crotchety, almost crippled Autobot. I'm like, no. Why he's? I'm sorry, that might have sounded ageist and ableist there. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to go there with that. But like, he did not look like that in his. He wasn't old and like using a cane in the original. Like, I feel like that was just unnecessary comic relief there. I'm like, that, I hated that. So they finally showed the Matrix. You know, I'm like, okay, this is what we should have got when they showed the Allspark earlier. And I feel like it also kind of fit with the whole, like, it would only work for the chosen person. So that kind of, that definitely fit with the original Matrix of leadership. Then we get Devastator again. Now, you remember when I mentioned about the first movie, how they named that tank that was supposed to be Brawl, named that Devastator. Then we actually get the real Devastator. So now we got two characters named Devastator in the whole thing, where should have just been this one. I had mixed feelings about this one, just because, like, yeah, they used a whole bunch of Constructicons. Some of the names were changed, which I was a little peeved at, but I wasn't too upset. But they had him looking like this big, huge, almost gorilla looking thing, which I guess, with the whole having to fit with what parts made him up, I could understand him not being a regular standing on two legs humanoid bot. But yeah, I was mixed feelings with Devastator here. I did not like the whole, robot scrotum thing at the end where they showed the two cannonballs together, because the machines that made him up, it was a crane and not a wrecking ball. So I'm like, they had those wrecking balls come out of nowhere. So they really forced that joke. Like, none of those vehicles had wrecking balls on them. Then all of a sudden he does when he's a combined form. I'm like, no, that wasn't right. I do like that whole, like, him sucking up the sand thing, because that reminded me of when Springer died in the beginning of season 3, how that garbage scow kind of sucked him up out of that goop that they were on Planet Goo. So that, maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see with that one, but that felt like a G1 reference there. So that's about it with Revenge of the Fallen. Of course, Optimus Prime kills the Fallen at the end. That was, I think from this point on, I really feel like Megatron becomes, like, not as huge of a threat. Like, he's involved the rest of the time, but I don't really feel like he is, I don't really feel like he's a huge threat from this point on. Oh, one last thing, Jolt. That was another reach for an obscure character. Like, well, no, not super obscure. He was both in he was in the comics. He wasn't in the cartoon at all. But what I do feel like this was a reach was I think GM or Chevy was trying to push their electric car called a Chevy Volt. So I really think that this was them trying to push that car. And you barely notice he's even in the movie. Like, yeah, he's on the road with the Autobots at one point, but, like, he's barely noticeable. So the only time you see him is at the end, where he's trying to use his electric powers to fuse Jetfire's body onto Optimus Prime. Like, that was just a really forced plot device there. I'm like, you ain't been in nan scene prior to this in this movie, and then all of a sudden you're used for that. Like, and I really feel like that was forced. I really feel like that was also a forced product plug by Chevy in this. So I feel like I feel like that's been done throughout these whole movies, like Chevy, GM, and coming up here in Dark of the Moon, a whole lot of forced product placement, and I'll get to that in a second. So next we got Dark of the Moon. I like how they showed, Cybertron at war in the beginning, but what threw me off was you got a ship that was leaving Cybertron with a Sentinel Prime on it. Now, Sentinel Prime was, of course, one of the primes prior to Optimus Prime, so I was cool with them using him. That was a unique thing they did. His ship was leaving Cybertron, but got shot down as it was leaving Cybertron, but crash lands on the moon. If you get shot down as you're leaving Cybertron and you land on the moon, Earth's moon, so how close are Cybertron and Earth then? That was just like, I don't think they thought about that. But next up, we finally got Carly showing up. Now, she was only Carly in name and hair. She wasn't this supermodel type girl in the cartoon. But I was glad that they finally, like, referenced that character, when I feel like she should have been that from the jump in the original. No, not the original, but in the first movie. Going back to that whole product placement thing, we got this red Ferrari named Dino. Now, prior to the movie coming out, like I said, I would always go and look at, find whatever I could find on the internet as far as what who the characters were going to be, who the new characters were going to be in the movie, all that kind of stuff. They at first wanted to name him Mirage, which I was happy with, and he was the the race car, the white and blue race car from the original. So I was happy that he was actually going to be in the movie. I was cool with him being a Ferrari because, you know, again, we're trying to fit with the whole robots in disguise theme. You're not going to see a Formula One race car on the street in real life. So that would not be a good disguise for a robot. So I was cool with him being a Ferrari. What I didn't like, one, they made him red instead of white and blue. So all this time, Michael Bay, all this time you've been talking about red don't show up well on film. So you declined to make characters that were supposed to be red, but now you make a character who's not supposed to be red. So now all of a sudden red fits on screen. And then also they named him Dino. They were forced to name him Dino by Ferrari. They named him Dino after the creator of Ferrari. So there was no Transformer ever in life named Dino, but they make him, and I don't know, maybe they had to do that to, no, I feel like, I think they asked him to. I don't know that from what I've read, it was a request, but not a requirement. But you gonna name him Dino after the owner of Ferrari and not after an actual Transformer? When there is plenty of Transformers that have not had some shine in these movies yet, and you just gonna name him something random. I mean, no, it wasn't random, but give him a name that wasn't actual Transformers name. I mean, so many other red Transformers that could have been here. Cliff Jumper. There's a obscure toy that from the G1 line that didn't make it to the cartoon or comics. Overdrive, Wind Charger, Swerve. A whole bunch of red Autobot cars that could have been used here instead of using a name that didn't exist in Transformers at all, Dino. Shockwave shows up in this one, which I was cool with, but like, you don't get any lines from him. He's like, Shockwave in the cartoon and the comics was this cold, calculating Decepticon. Like, he was pretty fierce, like especially in the comics. In the comics, he actually overthrew Megatron in every iteration of the comics, whereas he was super loyal to Megatron in the cartoon. But like for him, like he was menacing, like he fit the personality that way, so I enjoyed that. But the fact that he don't get any lines, you don't get any motivation for why he's there, he just kind of randomly shows up as this big bad. Like, so I feel like they just could have fleshed his character out more. I was happy that he was there. I liked his appearance and his use, but just I feel like they could have fleshed his character out a little bit more there. And that big, huge Robo Trimmer looking thing, like, I mean, it was dope, but I was like, this came out of nowhere. Now I love how they used Laserbeak in this one. Like Laserbeak, his alt mode was really, really good. Pretty spot on with his alt mode in his robot mode, because like his robot mode is actually the Vulture, and his alt mode is, in the original it was that cassette tape. So in this one, his alt mode, they really do fit the robots in disguise thing with him, because he's actually changed alt modes in this one. At one point, he was that little bumblebee looking car in that little girl's backyard, but pink. And then another time in the movie, he's a printer that transforms back into his Vulture mode. So I think they really did a good job of using, one, the robots in disguise theme, but then also one thing that I give all these movies, all the Michael Bay movies, props for, is that the Transformers aren't dependent on being at their home base and using a scanner from there to scan for alt modes. They can scan for more appropriate alt modes on the fly, which again feels like that fits their theme of being robots in disguise a whole lot better. Like, if you need a better disguise for that moment, scan a different vehicle that fits in with the environment. So I really feel like that's one thumbs up I give them for out of all of this. I mean, not just one, but one major one that I feel like they did a really good job on that didn't get touched on at all in the cartoon. Then we also get this character named Q. There was no Transformer named Q in any continuity, but if you're a fan of G1, if you pay attention to like the fact that he was an inventor, he was making all these crazy gadgets and whatnot, that really was Wheeljack. That really should have been that was really Wheeljack, but with a different name. And so again, another thing where I'm like, you're just giving taking characteristics from one character but giving him a name that doesn't match, or you taking a name, a well-known name, and just slapping it on any random character that doesn't fit. Now, I also was a little annoyed at Megatron being a truck at this one. I was like, why is Megatron a truck like Optimus Prime? But then I realized in the first two movies, he was either being revived or resurrected and immediately going in to take over the world mode. So he didn't really care about blending in. So that's why he had those really menacing looking alt modes. Whereas here, he's kind of down on his luck, and he kind of needs to blend into this point. So at this point, I can understand why he's a truck, because he needs to kind of lay low and kind of do things on the slide, as opposed to just being like, I'm big bad Megatron, I'm gonna do what I want. Next up, we got the dreads, those predator looking Decepticons that were on the road chasing the other Autobots. They all transformed into Chevy Suburbans, and I think their names were let's see, Crankcase, Crowbar, and I forget the third one's name, but they were all only one of those names, I think it was Crankcase, was actually a Transformers character prior to this movie. The other two were just random names. And again, I feel like this could have been a scene for the Stunticons to come in. They could have just used cars here and used the Stunticons, Breakdown, Wild Rider, Dragstrip, and Dead End. Any of those four could have been used here, but no, again, they reach for obscurity, they reach for characters nobody cares or knows about. But that did lead to, this was another one of my favorite scenes, that whole chase, and then at the end where the two dreads that were left face off against Ironhide and Sideswipe. And then getting taken out there. I like that scene. Next, we see Sentinel Prime killing Ironhide. I think the fact that he got shot in the back was a nod to how in the originals, Ironhide was very heavily armored up front, but not in the back. And he did get shot in the back one time. He didn't die, but he got shot in the back one time in the first 5 episodes of Transformers. So I think this was a nod to him, how he wasn't very well armored in the back there. Then we also have the Wreckers, which I think those were the 3 race cars, and they all matched enough to their G1 counterparts. You have Leadfoot, Topspin, and Roadbuster. Those are actually 3 names of actual members of the Wreckers in the comics. So that one worked there. Now, another good thing I do give them a lot of credit for is they used, for the rest of this story, they used two story plots from the original cartoon. There was in season 2, there was this one called Megatron's Master Plan, where Megatron fooled the humans into banishing the Autobots from Earth, and that fit the whole thing where the Autobots got on that ship and left Earth there. So that was a nod to that in G1. And then later on, there's that plot point where they were trying to bring Cybertron to Earth. It was called the Ultimate Doom, and basically they were trying to bring Cybertron to Earth. So I give them props for using two storylines from the actual cartoon there. So they mixed those together. But yeah, that was pretty much it for Dark of the Moon, all the stuff I liked and didn't like there. Alright, so I'm gonna just hit really quick the last 3 movies, Age of Extinction, Last Night, and Bumblebee. At this point, I just kind of was like, okay, I've been on this train for this long already, let me just see it to the end. So I wasn't really super invested in them. With Age of Extinction, a couple of things with Hound. I think it's actually officially stated that Hound was actually a mix of Bulkhead from, I think, Transformers Animated and Cup from the originals. So I understand, they do this a lot. I know this happens has happened with The Walking Dead before, how when they make the TV show, they make this new character, but it's actually a mix of 2 comic characters or something like that. So I get it, but I'm like, just either name him Bulkhead or Cup. Like, why throw? Because Hound's original personality, like, he fit somewhat the look. Because both Hound and Bulkhead were military vehicles. I'm cool with, I was cool with that. But then, you know, Hound's personality was more of a, I mean, he could fight, but he was more of a peaceful, nature-loving Autobot, as opposed to Bulkhead being, trigger happy and violent and whatnot. So I was like, just name him Bulkhead. Don't give him the name of this character, but then the personality of this character. Like that I didn't like. I mean, I liked him in general, but just what they chose to do with the characters, I was like, why do that? Crosshairs does not look or act anything like he does in the comics and cartoon. Crosshairs was blue and red, and he was nowhere near like the ornery, somewhat high-tempered one that was in the movie. Like this green sharpshooter guy. Again, it was a good character in general, but the fact that he was nothing like what his name implied from the original. I'm like, just give him a different name, or give him the name of somebody who actually fits that personality. Drift was cool. Him being an ex-Decepticon and also being a car with no guns and samurai blades, like that was dope. I liked, and I had mixed feelings about him being a triple changer. Like, overall, I thought it was cool. I was like, wow, they actually are legit using triple changers here. But for him being a car and a helicopter, I'm like, why not use that opportunity to use Springer from the original? Because both Springer and Sandstorm were had all modes of a helicopter and a car. So I was like, even though I do like that they used Drift, I do like that that they went outside the box and made it a triple changer. I also was like, you could have used Springer here, because another fan favorite that didn't get used here and could have. I didn't like how the big bad in this movie was Lockdown. Now, I knew of Lockdown, but I never really considered that. I never really thought Lockdown was that big of a threat to as he was in this movie. Like, I thought he was just a minor character. I mean, I may be wrong. If any Lockdown fans out there, let me know if I'm off on that one. But yeah, I don't see why he should have been the big bad of this movie, especially outshining Megatron, aka Galvatron, in this movie. Speaking of which, I'm jumping ahead. I didn't like how the whole transforming him thing, how that affected the visuals on the transformations. I just can't even describe it. I'll just have to maybe show a picture here. But I didn't really like that at all. But yeah, Lockdown. This is another thing that pissed me off about, because they let him be a Lamborghini. When I'm like, oh, so now y'all want to use a Lamborghini when my boy Sideswipe should have had his original form of Lamborghini there. So yeah, that and the fact that he was the big bad, and I don't think his character, his previous appearances in the fandom, I don't think that was deserving of him being the big bad in this movie. I didn't realize this till after I saw the movie, but those wolves on his ship were named Steeljaw, and I'm like, that was I feel like that wasn't a correct use of that name. Like, Steeljaw was one of Blaster's tapes, and he was a lion in that movie. I mean, in the original cartoon and comic, and we never saw him transform at all. So I was just like, another just slapping a good character's name on a random character that didn't fit at all in the movie. Then we got the Dinobots. I'm glad they showed up, but this is kind of bleeding over from here into the last night. How they show up here, and this is the only time we see them in robot mode, which actually fits with the cartoon, because in the cartoon, by the time season 3 rolls around, you rarely, if ever, see them in their robot mode, and they're used as comic relief at this point. Same thing happened here. They're they're bad A's, they're and they're super powerful when they first show up, but that's the last time you see them in robot mode. And then by the time you see them in the last night, they're still powerful, but now they're being used as comic relief there. So they didn't. They both did and didn't do the Dinobots right, but it was accurate, but for bad reasons. I didn't like how the flying one was named Strafe. Now, should have been Swoop, but they gave him the name of one of the Technobots. Now he actually somewhat looks like the Technobot he was named after, because of so that Technobot was a like a space fighter, and it had like two nose cones as opposed to one nose cone like a regular jet does. So I guess that kind of fits the two-headed dragon look he had. But again, I was just like, why are you mixing these two? There was no need for that. Just keep him as a robotic pteranodon. Like, there was no need to mix those two characters together there. That was pretty much it with that one. Like, I had more problems with the writing than I did with the actual characters there. Last night, like that whole Knights of Cybertron thing, like they pulled that out of nowhere. Like, I don't know anywhere in any of the continuities where something like that happened, where like 12 of them transform into one big old. It was pretty dope looking, I'll give it that. But how they mixed into one big huge dragon, like that was nowhere in any of the continuities. So that was kind of, and I get, coming up with new storylines, like I get it, but it was just like, what? Where are we going? Like, at this point, I was like, hey, I'm just watching it, just being entertained. Like, yeah. Anyway, then the whole Earth being Unicron thing, that was another thing that just came out of nowhere. Unicron was always a big, huge, giant robot that could transform into a planet that came from somewhere else. Like, it wasn't Earth itself. And you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit with this, because if Earth has been Unicron this whole time, then why have Transformers been coming to Earth thinking that it's Earth, thinking that it's something else the whole time? Like, somebody would have known that was Unicron. Like, that's not going to catch everybody by surprise. So yeah, that was just kind of out from left field. Last thing I'll say, last two things. Megatron's Decepticons that he sprung free during this movie, like all of them except for Onslaught, none of them were actually Transformers prior. They were just these random names thrown on the random bots, which, I guess that was a good thing, because pretty much all of them died. So it wasn't like your favorite character or favorite Decepticon got killed pretty quickly. Now Onslaught did. Now Onslaught should have been you could have used him as one of the Decepticons from the first movie, since they were all military vehicles. He was a missile trailer in the comics and the cartoon. They make him a pickup truck in this one. I don't get that. But yeah, he gets killed really quickly. I think he gets his head chopped off by Drift and then blown up. So the fact that he finally makes an appearance and then dies immediately, and then they go through all this trouble of, doing this whole A-team introduction of all these bad A characters, and then they get killed off super quick. That was just dumb to me. Like, that was all that hype up for characters who don't even exist at all, and then they die. The other thing, Hot Rod showing up. He was Hot Rod only in name. Again, another thing that I hate, when they just throw a popular name on a random character and nothing else about them fits. Of course, it fit that he was a car, but he was a Lamborghini again, which I felt Sideswipe should have had. And his colors aren't right. He actually, in his robot mode, when I saw the pre-production pictures of him, I'm like, dude looks more like Wild Rider from the Stunticons than Hot Rod. And then he has the French accent. Like, again, other than being a car and being named Hot Rod, he does not fit who Hot Rod actually was at all. So then we got Bumblebee. That first 5 minutes of Bumblebee actually almost make up for all the other trash they did prior to that. Like, if we got that from the beginning, that we Transformers fans and new fans would have been so happy. And I actually felt like I was watching a cutscene from the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron games that came out on PlayStation and Xbox, which is a good thing. Like, it was a good that they reminded me of that, because I would play those games. I'm like, I wish the movies would have looked like this. Of course, it wasn't like that for the whole rest of the movie, but I was that was a good nod to what we all wanted in the first place. I mean, we saw Braun, Cliffjumper, Wheeljack, RC, Thundercrackers, Soundwave, Shockwave, Blitzwing was in it. I didn't like how they used Blitzwing because his paint job reminded me of Starscream. Like until I looked it up later, I didn't know that was Blitzwing there. And plus, Blitzwing was a triple changer, but they only used him as a jet in this one. So that made me have mixed feelings about Shatter and Dropkick, who were the two villains in this one. They were triple changers, which I was cool with. I'm glad they actually had some more triple changes in there, and they were pretty dope looking. But they also, I can't recall any Transformers named Shatter or Dropkick in any other continuity. So again, they just kind of pulling new stuff out of nowhere there. But I do like, I do like the characters in general. Outside of that, I do love their alt modes. And I do love that triple changes were used. And I love that we got a new female Decepticon. I feel like female Transformers are scarce in general. I mean, they've had a lot more come up in recent continuities, which is good. But just in general, there's just too few of them. And for them to have a female Decepticon, that was pretty dope. I'm like, I don't feel like, other than Slipstream, I don't know of any Slipstream and Black Arachnia from Beast Wars. Other than that, I don't know too many female Decepticons. So I mean, there are probably some out there that I don't know of, but just the fact that they introduced a new one, I was on board with that. And again, Bumblebee proved me wrong with the whole nobody taking a Volkswagen Beetle seriously. That actually worked, so I was wrong on that. But that is it. That is it for my rant on the Transformers movies. I do believe I'm going to go ahead and do G.I. Joe after this. So you'll still be on the lookout for that one. And that is it. Y'all have a good night. Y'all have a good time at whatever con you're going to next, whenever that is. Be safe. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Good luck on your cosplay builds. Please hit that like button, that subscribe button, that share button. Leave me some comments. And I will see y'all at the next video. Peace.